Okay, the second way of including CSS in your HTML file or your websites is through internal CSS. So the last video we covered inline CSS, which is right here. We have some CSS inline used as an attribute right within an HTML tag, which obviously isn't best practice. And then the second way is through internal CSS. So create a new file and call it internal.html. And we're going to copy that basic file structure again and paste it in to save us some time. And I'm just going to rename this to internal CSS. I'm going to remove this p tag as well. And I'm going to just add a level 1 heading and say, just add a few things here. Internal CSS, a paragraph tag. This page uses internal CSS, which is cleaner than inline CSS. However, HTML is best left CSS free. Now, just a quick note on what I just said here. So internal CSS, internal CSS is cleaner than inline CSS because inline CSS can get really messy, especially if you're wanting to style specific individual tags. You're going to have CSS all over the place, and it's going to be incredibly messy, which is why it's bad practice. The internal CSS, however, is kind of separated from the HTML and gives you greater control because you're not just specifically styling individual elements. You can actually use selectors, but it's still included in the HTML file. And so we should be leaving our HTML file CSS free and have our CSS totally separate in separate files, but we'll get there. Right now, let's talk about internal CSS. To achieve internal CSS, all you got to do is up in the head tag. Now you can really add this anywhere, but it's usually best to have it included in the head tag. Is a style tag. There is a style tag, and you give it the type of text/CSS. And now all you really got to do is just add your CSS in here. So I'm going to select the level 1 heading. And I'm going to say color orange. You can see I changed the level 1 heading to the color orange. You might be wondering, why does this layout of my CSS here look a little bit different than when you were learning in the previous slides? Well, you can really, as long as your styles are in between the curly braces, you can do whatever layout you want. You can have no spaces here. You can have this on a new line. You could do this. You could do this. You could do that. You could do that. There's really kind of an endless possibilities for that. But usually the most common ways are all in one line, like so, or especially if you have multiple styles, like I'll show you, you would do something like this. You would have it in between on a new line, tabbed in one. It's just easier for layout. The reason why you'd like to do this is because you might want to have multiple styles in between the curly braces, and it's just cleaner to read. Let's say, let's make it bigger. There we go. So you could see there. Now let's go ahead and add another style here, body. Now, it's good to know that whenever you open a curly brace, always close the curly brace, just like when you do HTML. When you open a tag, close the tag right away, because otherwise, if you don't, you're going to get a lot of issues, and you're going to get some bugs. And that is, in fact, the most common bug that I think comes up, at least with my students. I get a lot of questions and concerns from my students saying, "Hey, why doesn't this work?" 5 minutes later, they respond, say, "Hey, sorry, I figured it out. I forgot to close my curly brace," or "I forgot to close my tag." So remember to do that. Body, I'm just going to say background black. And now we can't see our paragraph tag, so why don't we go ahead and style that paragraph tag to be, I don't know, let's say color white. Whoops. I'm used to spelling it the proper way, the Canadian way. But unfortunately, CSS is based off of how Americans spell color. I apologize if you're American. This is just a funny way of spelling color. But I have to use both because I type it normally using a U, but when I'm coding, I have to use the American spelling. So keep that in mind. There we go. So you can see we have some internal CSS. This is called internal CSS. So the reason why it is cleaner is because it is separated from the tags a little bit. It has its own section here within the style tag, and you have greater impact. You can select all H1 tags rather than just styling specifically this one H1 tag, or all paragraph tags. This styles every single paragraph tag rather than if I were just to do the styles in here using inline CSS. But again, internal CSS still isn't best practice. Better than in inline CSS, but not as good as the next type of CSS, which is the only way you should really be using CSS. So see you in the next lecture.